championships, and you forget, like, there's one of them lost and they're celebrating. I'm like, yeah, and my son's sad. He goes, well, you cried when you lost the Super Bowl. And I was like, yeah, it was the Super Bowl, buddy. But it's a Super Bowl, so it's all perspective, right? So, all right.
Questions?
With mini camp coming up next week, how will it be different from what you're doing now?
It's not going to be. So they've got their physicals on Monday. We're going to hold the same structure of practice. With the walkthroughs, it's really going to be more of the same.
So the intensity level, everything's the same?
Same.
You expect everyone here for minicamp?
Yes.
Robert, with Elijah Moore, what's kind of the next step in him actually?
You know what? It's obviously second year for him, and he looks really good. His next step really is just to continue operating the way he does. You know, he is by far one of our hardest workers. He's so in tune to his body. He's in tune to scheme, and he's trying to get better. And there's been some great battles between him and DJ Reed and Bryce and all the other DBs. And he looks really, really good. It's just, you know, it was the same thing last year though. He looked fantastic during OTAs and training camp. It's continuing to absorb. So when he does hit the ground, when we hit the ground running in week one, he's where he was mid-season. But with him, it's really just continuing to grow and get better.
How much is it going to help him to going against a guy like DJ who's so competitive? And, you know, you said last week the way he takes every play seriously.
I think it's beneficial for all of them because it's when you have a guy like DJ who plays as hard as he does, those guys can embarrass the heck out of you in a hurry if you don't match their intensity. And so they're that competition level for the receivers and DBs, and it's good for everybody.
With Crowder gone, who's your slot receiver?
Working through it.
Does Crowder not being here and Garrett Wilson coming in, does that change Elijah's role at all and how you can use him? Because it seemed like last year you used him outside a lot because you had Jameson inside, you had Braxton inside. Now, I think Garrett is kind of a kid play either as well. Yeah,
the cool thing about the receiver room is there's a lot of versatility in it. So it's not trying to pigeonhole, and it's kind of the philosophy of the system, not to pigeonhole guys in certain spots, but having the flexibility to, all right, we can get a mismatch here with Corey. Let's put him in the slot. Let's put Garrett in the slot. Let's put Elijah in the slot. So it's really moving parts. You might put CJU or Conklin, and it's just where do we put our guys to take advantage of some of the mismatches, and that's where I think it's really cool, and that's where the creativity comes from LaFleur. So
when you have someone like Corey who's been in the league for a while, I guess it's probably easy for him to go here, there. But when you have two young guys like Elijah only playing a year, and then Garrett, obviously the rookie, do you worry some with that? Okay, you're inside this play, outside that play, maybe overwhelming them somewhere you want them to just focus on one position because of their age? Yeah,
that's even if they're veterans. The story I talk about is with. There's a balance, there's a breaking point for every single player in football. In San Francisco with Fred Warner, who is as smart as anybody in terms of just being able to absorb scheme, get it out of his mouth, get people lined up. There was a game against Arizona where we put a lot of checks on him, a lot of checks. And it was, to this day, probably the worst game he had played. And it was that moment, I was like, shoot. We as a coaching staff screwed him. We put way too much on him, and then we find that balance, and then off he goes. It's the same thing with every receiver, whether you're first year or 10th year. What's the balance? What's the breaking point? And how do you get these guys to play as fast as possible? So to play inside out, if they can, let them rip. If they can't, you just got to pull some back.
Ideally, though, I know, like I said, there was some plays where Elijah's inside, somebody's outside, same with Garrett. But ideally, would you want them to have two outside receivers and a slot receiver, and that's kind of your three set?
No, I think the versatility is what makes it great. If you know where guys are lined up all the time, I think it's easy to defend. But when you have a guy, and I think that's why in the system it was always easy to get Julio the ball. I mean, of course you're going to double Julio, but where the heck is Julio? And just having that versatility. Same thing when Andre Johnson back in Houston. Like if you don't know where he is, then how do you double him? You make people communicate all the different motions, all the different alignments, all the different things that happen. You want that versatility, and that's what makes it exciting.
Other than his body, what's different about Zach this year?
I think he's a lot more comfortable in the offense. I do. I think he is committed to the process of taking the snap and going through progression, understanding exactly where his eyes need to go on every snap. And now it's just a matter of just trusting what he sees and letting it rip. And he's been doing a really nice job with it. So that you could feel the comfort. And there's still got a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but at the same time you could see the exactly what we were hoping for in terms of him coming back, having better command of the offense and better confidence in his progression.
We talked to Jeff last week, and he spoke about the defensive line rotation and limiting those guys to 30 to 35 snaps. Can you just expand on that a little bit and also explain the specific benefit of leaving those, kind of keeping your defensive linemen fresh in that regard? Yeah.
So we ask our D-line to do a lot in terms of and from an attack standpoint. So it's physically, it is hard unless you're a freak. An absolute freakazoid like a guy like Aaron Donald who can go forever. Most of the time you're trying to, and it's really not a 30 to 35 snap count. It's more of a percentage. If you look at things in the past, you're really trying to hit in a perfect world, guys, because there's obviously variables. You're trying to hit a 70% mark. So, like, the example I'll give is, there's 60 to 65 snaps on average for a defensive team. There's in that range, and if you hit 70%, you're around 40 to 45 snaps. So, if we use a guy like Quinnen, for example, in a perfect scenario, and we're winning football games, those 40 to 45 snaps, 30 to 35 of them are against the pass. So you're trying to time it. So to try to give you an overall picture, a view of it, let's just say we start the game, and I'll use Quinnen as an example. Well, he rolls out first down, rolls out second down, third down, they convert. We'll get Quinnen off the field. He's not on the field for first down. He's not on the field for second down. Third down comes in, he's back on the field, we're off the field, and we get off. So in that scenario, he played 4 out of 6 snaps. That's about 67%. So you're just trying to pace it for these guys so that they're fresh as possible when crunch time hits, those third downs, those 2 minutes when we need a play. So the 30 to 35 rule, that Brick hit, he's got great expectations. He's probably expecting 50 snaps a game, but it's more if you went on average, you're probably in that 70% range where guys like DeForest Buckner, I think that's what we were hitting in San Fran with Bosa and Armstead is it's not a perfect science, guys. If you're playing 90 snaps in a game, well, shoot, you're going to be in the 60 play range. It's just going to keep elevating, but you're just trying to make sure that they are absolutely at the freshest they can be when it's third down and 2 minutes.
Do you have someone tracking that in game, Robert? Do you know in the third quarter this guy's played this many snaps or? No,
it's an art for the D-line coach. It's making sure that he is pacing it where your 4 horsemen, if you will, or 5 or 6 pass rushers, the guys that we're leaning on. Because you look in a 2 minute situation and teams are driving. You can't. It's if you're really, really exerting all your energy. And you should be in a pass rush situation where you're trying to get a sack. To go 4 snaps in a row is taxing, and not to be able to have guys fresh for those moments is you're playing with fire.
Robert, what enabled Braxton and Zach to have such good chemistry last year? And what is Braxton's role now? How do you see his role?
I see Braxton no different. He's so smart, so versatile. He can play Z, he can play the X, he can play the F, he can do all the gadgets. He's a returner. So really happy he's here. But obviously his role is a little bit more of a leadership role, and I think guys look up to him and the way he works and the way he does things. But don't see anything different with how Braxton's used.
And what enabled him to have such good chemistry with Zach last year?
I think it's all encompassing. I think there's a chemistry with the coordinator, and it took a little bit of learning in that first year. But I think there's there's a comfort level with Braxton, knowing that he's going to be exactly where he needs to be every single play, and I think that's comforting not only for the coaches, but it's comforting for the quarterback to know that, all right, Braxton's on the field. I know he's going to be. Of all the guys, I know he's going to be where he needs to be. It's easy to get people the football when you're confident in him. So, and it's a credit to Braxton with the way he works.
Robert, a couple more with Rob Calabrese. What differences do you see from last year to this year? What gave you the confidence to maybe give him, more of a role with Zach?
Yeah, like I said, in the second half of the year last year, when we had all the different coaches in there, it was really Rob who was the lead voice, and you see this year a lot more, just a lot more confidence, a lot more conviction. Him and Mike having more conversation. Obviously, it's more one-on-one, more. I don't know if streamline's the word, but it's more focused, I guess you could say, and because of it, I think when you have one voice, and then obviously Mike in there too, but when you're limited in that regard, you're confident because you know exactly what was said and how you can either expand on it or fix what was said. So there's a lot more control in that in terms of for him in terms of being able to communicate with Zach in the way that Zach needs, and Mike and Joe for that matter, from a communication standpoint. But no, he's been doing a great job. So.
Robert, how much do you tweak scheme in the offseason from year to year, and does that get affected by free agency signings, by the draft? Do you then reevaluate everything? Not everything, but you got new pieces. Do you start looking at everything again? What's that process like?
So this time of year, you have your base fundamentals and the things that you do, your basic install, but you are going to try some stuff and throw some stuff out there, and offense is going to try some new things to see what it looks like. We're trying some new things on defense to see what it looks like, and you try to take advantage of some of the pieces that you may or may not have, and you also look at the division that you're in and the teams that you're playing on during the season, and you're trying to make sure that things fit. So when that game comes up, you'll be prepared for it. So this time of year is all about trying some new stuff, but not necessarily departing from what your core philosophies are.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.